The scream of twisted metal and the shatter of glass jolted Travis Kent to his feet before the sound had even finished echoing through the trees behind his cabin. He dropped the wrench he'd been using to fix the old water pump and sprinted toward the smoke rising beyond the ridge, his boots thudding against the damp forest floor. "Dylan! Stay inside!" he called to his 8-year-old son, who was peeking out the screen door with wide eyes. Travis didn't stop to grab a jacket. He didn't think. He just ran. By the time he reached the wreck, steam hissed up from the hood of a black SUV that had flipped on its side, wedged against a pine tree like a crumbled soda can. The driver's side window was shattered, and inside, a woman lay slumped over the wheel, blood trickling from her forehead. "Hey!" he shouted, scrambling down the embankment. "Hey, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, dazed, glassy, but she didn't speak. Travis didn't waste time. Whoever she was, she needed out now. He climbed up onto the side of the SUV, gripped the bent door frame, and yanked until the metal groaned. He managed to wrench it open enough to reach in and unbuckle her seat belt. She sagged forward into his arms. "I got you," he muttered, breathless. "You're okay now. I got you." She was light. Too light. And cold. Her blazer was soaked through, and her breathing was shallow, but steady. With effort, he carried her up the slope and back toward his cabin, rain beginning to drizzle through the pine branches as thunder rolled in the distance. It wasn't until later, after he'd cleaned the gash on her forehead, wrapped her in a blanket, and set her by the fire, that she finally spoke. "My name's Elara," she whispered, her voice raw. "Elara Thorne." Travis crouched beside the couch where she lay. "I'm Travis. You're lucky to be alive." She blinked at him slowly, her eyes flicking around the small, worn cabin. "Where's my phone?" "Probably still in the wreck," he said. "You can call someone once the storm clears." "No reception out here." "No reception?" she repeated like he just told her she was on Mars. Travis gave a half grin. "Welcome to Blackridge County." She stared at him, expression unreadable, and then her eyes landed on the small drawing Dylan had left on the coffee table, a crayon rocket ship with "To Dad, love Dylan" scribbled across the top. "You have a kid?" she said quietly. "Yeah. Just me and him now." Elara didn't ask questions. She just nodded, like she understood, like she'd heard enough stories like his before. By morning, the SUV had been towed by the single mechanic in town. Elara's security team, who'd finally gotten through, arrived in 2 black cars that looked like they belonged in a presidential convoy. Travis stood on the porch with Dylan beside him, watching as she stepped into the back seat of one of the vehicles, her expression unreadable again. She turned once, just once, and met his eyes. Then she was gone. 3 weeks passed. Travis went back to fixing roofs and unclogging drains, taking whatever small jobs came through in town. He picked Dylan up from school each day and helped him with math homework at night. Things were quiet again. Until one afternoon, a sleek white car pulled up the gravel drive, and Elara Thorne stepped out wearing a navy coat and heels that didn't belong anywhere near dirt. Dylan was the first to see her. "Dad! That lady from the crash!" Travis froze on the porch as she approached, her eyes locked on him. "I'm not here to say thank you," she said, stopping a few feet away. "Oh," Travis said, folding his arms. "So this is just a courtesy visit, then?" "No," she said. "It's a deal." He blinked. "A what?" She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, handing it to him. "My company is investing in a new eco-development. I want you to be part of the build. Lead contractor. Full crew. Entire year of work. I know your background, Army engineer, certified builder. You're overqualified for plumbing jobs in town." He stared at the paper. The numbers made his head spin. It was more money than he made in the last 5 years combined. "I don't get it," he said. "Why me?" "Because I saw you," she said. "How you carried me out of a wreck like it was nothing. How you live alone with a kid and still manage to be Calm, decent, capable. The kind of man who doesn't run from fire. Travis looked down at the contract, then back at her. You don't owe me anything. I know, she said. That's why I'm doing this. Dylan tugged on his sleeve. Dad, are you gonna work with the fancy lady? Elara crouched down and smiled softly at Dylan. You can call me Elara. Dylan nodded. Okay. You're really pretty. She laughed, a little caught off guard. Thanks, Dylan. Travis was still staring at the contract. I don't know what to say. Say yes, she said. And come to New York with me. He blinked. New York? My company's based there. The project starts in 3 weeks. I'll cover the move, housing, schooling for Dylan, everything. All expenses included. Travis shook his head slowly. You don't know me, Elara. I know enough, she said, her voice softening. And I meant it when I said this isn't about owing you. I want to do this. I want you to have a shot. He held her gaze for a long moment. All right, he said finally, the word heavy in his chest. We'll go. She smiled a real, genuine smile, and for the first time, Travis saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Hope. And maybe something more. The first thing Travis noticed when they stepped into the penthouse was the silence. Not the kind of silence you get in the woods. This one was padded in glass and marble, expensive and deliberate. The kind of silence that made a man like him feel like he'd walked into the wrong life. Elara didn't look back as she led them through the open foyer, her heels striking the polished floor with a confidence that hadn't wavered since the moment she met them at the airport. Dylan stuck close to Travis's side, his small hand gripping 2 fingers as his eyes darted between the floor-to-ceiling windows and the grand piano sitting untouched in the corner. This is temporary, Elara said, gesturing toward the vast living room. Until your townhouse is ready. I had the project team expedite the renovations. Shouldn't be more than 2 weeks. Travis nodded, unsure whether he should thank her or ask what a townhouse even looked like in this city. A woman in her early 50s appeared from the hallway, wearing a slate-gray blouse and a pleasant, neutral smile. This is Marla, Elara said. She'll be helping with Dylan's transition school enrollment, daily routine, anything you both need. Marla stepped forward and crouched to Dylan's level. Hi there, sweetheart. I heard you like space stuff. Dylan's eyes lit up. I built a cardboard rocket last summer. Then I think we're going to get along just fine, she said, offering her hand. Travis watched his son take it, the tension in his shoulders softening. Elara turned to him. You've got your own suite at the far end. Office attached. Thought you might want space to plan out the construction timelines. He studied her face. You always this prepared? She tilted her head slightly. I don't like improvising when I can avoid it. Travis didn't say it, but he was already noticing the cracks. The way her eyes lingered too long on the skyline. The way she gripped her phone like it owed her something. She was polished, measured but not unbreakable. They toured the site the next day. The location was a stretch of overgrown riverfront property just outside the city, half-abandoned warehouses, rusted fences, and a view of the skyline that took Travis's breath away. His boots sank slightly into the soft ground as he walked the perimeter, blueprints rolled under one arm. Elara stood by the SUV, arms crossed as she watched him. You think it can work? He nodded slowly. The soil's good. Foundations will hold. But it's gonna take time. And people who know what they're doing. You'll have full hiring authority, she said. Budget's already approved. He looked at her, frowning. You're trusting me with a lot. I am. Why? Her eyes didn't waver. Because I've built enough things surrounded by people who only tell me what I want to hear. I want something different this time. A pause. And you think I'm different? He said. I know you are. She turned before he could answer, her driver already opening the back door of the SUV. She paused just long enough to add, Dinner tomorrow night. My place. 7. Travis arched a brow. Business? Her lips curved slightly, but the expression didn't quite reach her eyes. Let's call it a discussion. When he arrived the next evening, Dylan was at home with Marla, already glued to a telescope they'd borrowed from the public library. The penthouse was dimly lit, all soft golds and shadows, with the city sprawling behind the glass like a living painting. Elara greeted him barefoot, wearing a black blouse tucked into tailored slacks, her hair pinned back in a way that made her cheekbones look sharper than usual. "You clean up nice," she said, handing him a glass of something amber. "Didn't know this was a dress code situation," he replied, glancing down at his button-up. "It's not." She gestured toward the dining room, where 2 plates waited beside a silver-domed dish. "I had the chef prepare something simple." "You have a chef?" "Only on weekdays." Dinner was roasted duck, something he'd never eaten before but didn't hate. She poured the wine, asked about Dylan's adjustment, and nodded as he told her about the school orientation and how Dylan had already made a friend named Mateo. Then she leaned back, wine glass in hand, and said, "I googled you." Travis stiffened slightly. "Didn't think I'd left much of a footprint." "You didn't. But I found a military commendation. You saved 3 men in Afghanistan. That's not nothing." He set his fork down. "It's not something I talk about. I'm not asking you to," she said. "But I want to understand who I'm working with." "Is that what this is?" he asked. "You trying to understand me?" Elara didn't flinch, but for a moment she looked tired. "Do you know how many people in this city want something from me?" she asked quietly. "Contracts, favors, positions, leverage. I walk into a room and it's never just a room, it's a negotiation. I'm always calculating the angle, the cost." "And tonight?" Travis asked. "What's the cost here?" She looked at him then, really looked, and something fragile flickered across her face. "I don't know yet," she said. "But I didn't invite you here to collect a debt. I asked because—" She stopped herself. Travis leaned forward. "Because?" Elara exhaled. "Because the night of that crash, I didn't think anyone would come. I thought I was going to die alone in that car. And then you showed up. No hesitation. No questions. I did what anyone would have done." "No," she said. "You didn't. Most people don't run toward wreckage." He didn't respond. He just watched her, the woman who'd built empires and still looked like she was waiting for something to collapse. The silence stretched. Finally she stood. "Come with me." He followed her through a side door he hadn't noticed earlier. It opened onto the rooftop. The wind was sharp, the city lights stretching in every direction. A glass table sat in the center, surrounded by tall hedges and lanterns that flickered like fireflies. "We'll break ground next week," she said, arms folded against the breeze. "Once we start, there's no turning back." Travis stepped beside her. "You afraid?" "No," she said. Then added, "Maybe. But I'm more afraid of building something that means nothing." He glanced at her. "You think this'll mean something?" "I want it to," she said. "I want this to be more than numbers. I want it to matter." He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, "You're not what I expected." She smiled faintly. "Neither are you." They stood in silence, the air electric between them. Not quite touching. Not quite crossing the line. But close. Closer than either of them had meant to be. The first thunderclap of tension came 3 days after groundbreaking. Travis stood at the center of the construction site, clipboard under one arm, sweat darkening the back of his shirt. The skeleton of the first eco unit had begun to rise, steel beams framed against the overcast sky, scaffolding humming with the rhythm of drills and boots. He was focused, methodical, and completely in control. Until Elara arrived. She stepped out of the black SUV wearing a cream trench coat belted at the waist, her hair swept up, her phone pressed to her ear. She didn't acknowledge the crew's stares or the site manager's hasty greeting. She walked straight toward Travis as if the steel and mud hadn't dared touch her soles. "No," she said into the phone. "The permits were cleared last week. If there's a delay now, it's internal. Fix it." She ended the call and finally looked at him. "You didn't tell me they were going with steel braces instead of timber." "I made the call this morning. Supply chain issue," Travis said, not missing a beat. "Timber delivery got diverted. Steel's more expensive, but it'll hold better in this climate." "Do I look like I'm worried about cost?" she asked, eyes narrowing. "No," he said evenly. "But I care about function. And I don't like waiting around for trucks that may not come." She exhaled, eyes flicking over the rising structure. "I'm not here to micromanage. I want this to work. But if I'm blindsided in a board meeting by a materials shift, I need to know why." "You just got your reason," he said. "And next time I'll call before I adjust anything." Her jaw tightened, then relaxed. "All right." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're not used to being questioned. I'm used to being right." He couldn't help the chuckle that escaped. "That's gonna make this interesting." Before she could respond, a shout came from the scaffolding. A worker had slipped, nothing serious, but enough to draw attention. Travis turned instantly, barking instructions, his voice cutting through the noise with practiced command. Elara watched him move, watched the way the men responded without hesitation. She didn't say anything until he returned. "You've done this before," she said. "I've led teams in worse conditions," he replied, brushing dust from his forearm. "The difference is, here, no one's shooting at us." She nodded slowly, then glanced toward the SUV. "Come by tonight. There's something I want to show you." He raised a brow. "Another rooftop monologue?" "Something different." When he arrived that evening, the penthouse was quiet. No glasses on the table. No wine. Just the sound of the city beyond the glass and the low hum of something classical playing in the background. She led him through the hallway, past the rooms he hadn't seen before, until they reached a door tucked behind a floor-length mirror. She opened it without ceremony. The room was small, windowless, and lined with sketches. Architectural designs, pencil renderings, and watercolors, some framed, most pinned haphazardly to corkboards. A drafting table stood in the center, surrounded by rolls of paper and open texts in multiple languages. Travis took a step inside. "This yours?" "All of it," she said quietly. "Before the boardrooms. Before the investors." He crossed to the nearest sketch. A cottage with curved walls and a garden roof. It looked like something out of a dream. "You studied design?" "I studied what I loved," she said. "And then gave it up when the company needed someone to run numbers instead of drawing them." He turned to her. "Why show me this now?" "Because you're building something with your hands," she said. "And I forgot what that felt like. Until I saw you on that site." He studied her face. The mask she so carefully wore was gone. What remained was something raw. Honest. "I want to design again," she said. "Not just approve things. I want you to look at my plans and tell me if they're garbage." "They're not," he said after a beat. "But I will if they ever are." She smiled, the edge of it soft and unguarded. "Deal." He looked around again, taking in the space. "You ever show this to anyone else?" "No," she said. "Just you." He didn't say anything after that. He didn't need to. The next morning, the city's most aggressive gossip column ran a full spread piece. "Elara Thorne's secret savior, who is the mystery man?" The article featured a blurred photo of Travis stepping out of her building, a circled face, and a speculative paragraph about his rugged charm paired with potential ex-military ties. Travis tossed the paper on the kitchen counter and pinched the bridge of his nose. "That's the third article this week," he muttered. Marla, pouring Dylan cereal, gave him a sympathetic glance. "It'll pass. These things always do." Dylan looked up from his spoon. "Are you famous now?" "Let's hope not." Travis said. Elara arrived at the construction site later that afternoon, her expression unreadable. I didn't authorize that leak, she said. The press must have followed one of the cars. I didn't ask for privacy, he replied. But I'm not built for headlines. I know, she said. But now that it's started, it won't stop. He exhaled. So what happens next? Next, she said, we act like we don't care. Because if we don't flinch, they'll get bored. And if they don't, I'll make them. He paused. You mean that? Her voice was quiet but firm. I protect what's mine. He looked at her then. Really looked. And something shifted. Later that night, as the wind whipped around the scaffolding and the lights of the city blinked like distant stars, Travis stood on the half-built rooftop of the first unit. He pulled out the folded sketch Elara had given him, one of her original designs with notes in the margins and a faint coffee stain near the corner. He traced the lines with his thumb, then tucked it back into his jacket. He didn't know where this thing between them was going. But he knew it was real. And it was only just beginning. The storm rolled in just before dawn, gray clouds pressing low over the city as the first drops of rain tapped against the windows of the townhouse Elara had secured for Travis and Dylan. Inside, the soft clink of a spoon echoed from the kitchen as Dylan stirred honey into his oatmeal, Marla humming faintly while packing his school bag. Travis stood at the front window, phone in hand, reading the message Elara had sent him only moments ago. Need you at the site. Urgent. He didn't wait to change. He grabbed his jacket, kissed Dylan on the head, and was out the door with a quick nod to Marla. The SUV was already waiting, parked just down the block. When he arrived, the site was quiet in a way that didn't feel right. He stepped out onto gravel slick with rain and spotted Elara near the edge of the property, standing beneath a temporary awning, her hair damp from the wind. You said urgent, he said as he approached. She turned to him, eyes fierce in a way he hadn't seen before, not afraid, but cornered. The board called an emergency vote last night. One of the partners is trying to kill the project. He's spinning the numbers, claiming it's bleeding too much overhead. Travis's jaw tightened. It's not. I know that, she said. But perception carries more weight than truth in those rooms. He stepped closer. What do you need from me? She hesitated for half a second. I need you at the review. I need someone who doesn't speak in glossed-up metrics. Someone who can look them in the eye and tell them what this project means. Not just to the city, but to the people building it. Travis didn't blink. When? 2 hours. Top floor of the Arcadian. I'll meet you there. He nodded, then turned to leave. Elara, he said, pausing. You're not alone in this. Her expression cracked just enough for him to see it, the pressure she carried, the weight that had begun to bend her spine without breaking it. I know, she said finally. That's why I called you. The review room was a cathedral of glass and steel, with a long obsidian table stretching beneath a chandelier that looked like falling stars. Elara walked in ahead of him, her heels silent across the polished floor. She wore a charcoal suit that didn't apologize for its sharpness. Travis followed behind in his boots and rolled sleeves, the only man in the room who looked like he'd ever held a hammer. The board members barely turned to acknowledge them. Ms. Thorne, the man at the head of the table said, adjusting his cufflinks. We're here to discuss viability. Nothing more. Then let's talk viability, she replied. You've got projections. I've got results. And he, she gestured to Travis, has the ground truth. All eyes turned to him. Travis didn't flinch. You want numbers? He asked. Fine. I've got them. But I'll give you something better. I've got a crew of men and women showing up at 5 in the morning in the rain, hauling steel beams and welding frames with their own sweat. People who were out of work 6 months ago, and now have paychecks steady enough to put food on the table. A few of the board members shifted. I've seen build sites fall apart, he continued. Seen what happens when projects like this get gutted halfway through. You walk away from this, you're not just losing money. You're tearing the rug out from under families. There was a long silence. Then one of the older board members leaned forward. And what makes you so sure this project will deliver? Travis looked him square in the eye. Because I'm building it. And I don't fail. The vote passed. Barely, but it passed. Later, as they stood in the lobby, Elara's shoulders finally dropped. She turned to him, eyes shining, and didn't say anything for a moment. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Yes, he replied. I did. She searched his face like she was trying to memorize it. Come with me, she said. This time, they didn't go to the penthouse or the site. She led him to a quiet gallery tucked between high rises, one with floor-to-ceiling windows and installations that breathed with color and light. She stopped in front of a canvas the size of a wall. It was abstract dark blue slashes across a stormy gray background, streaked with copper. My mother painted this, Elara said. Before she got sick. She used to say life was just movement and light. That if you stopped choosing, the world would choose for you. Travis looked at her. And what have you chosen? She turned to him, and this time, there was no mask. You. His heart didn't race. It thundered. Elara, he said, voice low. I have a son. I know. I'm not someone who fits into this world of yours. I don't want you to fit, she said. I just want you to stay. He stepped closer. Why? Because I've never felt safer than when I was in your arms. And because you're the only man who's ever looked at me and seen more than stock shares and strategy. He didn't hesitate. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't cautious. It was the kind of kiss that erased every line between them. That rewrote the story she'd been telling herself for years, that love was a transaction, that safety was control. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. What now? She whispered. No, he said. We go home. Together. 3 weeks later, the first unit on the site opened with a ribbon-cutting ceremony attended by the city's press and officials. But it wasn't Elara who gave the speech. It was Travis, standing beside Dylan, who grinned in a button-down shirt 2 sizes too big. He spoke about second chances. About rebuilding. About waking up to a life you never expected but couldn't imagine losing. And when the cameras stopped flashing and the crowd began to thin, Elara pulled him aside and placed a small velvet box in his hand. He opened it. Inside was a simple ring brushed titanium, understated, unmistakably solid. I could buy you 1,000 of these, she said, but I only want to give you one. He didn't answer. He just slid the ring onto his finger, then pulled her to him in front of everyone. Dylan whooped from the sidelines, clapping like he'd just seen a rocket launch. And Elara laughed. Not the reserved kind, not the polished kind. The real kind. The kind that sounded like home. The air inside the Thorne headquarters buzzed with the quiet tension of anticipation. The city-wide environmental initiative, the one Elara had been working on privately for over a year, was finally ready to be unveiled. It was the last piece in the puzzle for her. Not just for the company's future, but for herself. Travis stood beside her in the boardroom, dressed in a dark jacket and slate-gray shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms. He looked every bit the man who'd once hauled steel in the rain, but now carried the weight of something more permanent. He wasn't just here for show. He was part of this now. This isn't just another development, Elara said, her voice firm as she addressed the board. It's a promise. A shift in how we build. How we live. We're not just constructing homes. We're creating legacy. She turned toward Travis. Tell them about the launch. He stepped forward, unbothered by the suits watching him. We've got 6 families set to move into the first units next week. Solar integration's complete. Water systems are running clean. We've partnered with the local trade school to bring in apprentices for the second phase, people who'll learn the craft and stay on long term. This isn't a blueprint anymore. It's real. The vote was unanimous. The project would expand. When the meeting ended, Elara stayed behind, gathering her things with slow, deliberate care. Travis waited until the room cleared before speaking. You've been quiet since yesterday. She looked up. I had a call from my father's lawyer. Travis said nothing, letting the silence give her space. He left me a letter, she said, postmarked a month before the crash. It was buried in the estate files. I never knew it existed. He stepped closer. Do you want to talk about it? She handed him the envelope. He apologized. For pushing too hard. For forgetting I was a daughter before I was a successor. He said he hoped I'd finally build something that belonged to me, not to his legacy. Travis studied her. You already have. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. I think he knew I'd need someone who'd remind me I'm more than the company. He touched her hand. You've always been more. Later that evening, the three of them stood on the rooftop of their townhouse, Elara, Travis, and Dylan. The boy held a telescope, chattering about Saturn's rings as the city lights flickered below. Did you know, Dylan said, that some scientists think Saturn could float in water? Is that right? Travis asked, crouching beside him. Dylan nodded solemnly. Because it's made of gas. But it'd need a really, really big bathtub. Elara laughed, the sound softened by the wind tangling her hair. I think we'll have to settle for just seeing it tonight. Travis watched her as she leaned over to adjust the telescope. Not the Elara from the boardroom. Not the woman who'd stared down billion-dollar deals. But the Elara who smiled without calculating what it cost. The Elara who looked at his son like he was hers too. Later, after Dylan fell asleep in a blanket fort of pillows and night sky posters, Elara stood at the kitchen counter, pouring tea. Travis walked in and paused. You're not sleeping? Too much in my head, she said. He crossed to her, touching her hip lightly. Then let's get out of it for a while. She turned, setting the cup down, her eyes catching his. I've been thinking about something, she said. His brow arched. That sounds dangerous. I want to split the project's leadership, she said. Make it official. My name on the contracts. Yours on the ground. Equal. Not just in practice, but on paper. Travis didn't respond immediately. You sure the board will go for that? They already have, she said. I spoke to the legal team this morning. The contracts are ready. He took a breath, then nodded. All right. Partners, then. In every way. They stood there for a moment, the weight of her words settling between them like the final piece of something long overdue. I'm not used to this, she admitted. Not just sharing power. Sharing anything. He brushed a thumb across her cheek. You don't have to be perfect at it. You just have to keep showing up. I will, she whispered. Every day. The wedding wasn't announced. No press. No sweeping venue. Just a quiet rooftop garden, a handful of close friends, a justice of the peace, and Dylan in a navy suit that made him look far too grown up for his 8 years. As Elara walked toward Travis, wearing a simple ivory dress and a single white magnolia in her hair, the wind lifted off the Hudson and carried through the leaves above. You look like the beginning of something, Travis said, voice steady as she reached him. And you feel like home, she replied. They didn't recite vows from a script. They said what they meant, in their own words. I wasn't looking for you, she said, eyes locked on his. But I built my life around what I thought I had to be. And then you showed me what I could be. He took her hands. I didn't think I'd find love again. But you didn't just walk into my life, you rebuilt it. Stronger. Brighter. Real. When they kissed, Dylan clapped so hard he nearly dropped the ring box he'd been holding. Afterwards, they danced. Not to music from a string quartet or a DJ, but from a playlist Dylan had made with songs they'd all picked over weeks of night drives and kitchen breakfasts. The rooftop shimmered with fairy lights, and above them, the stars emerged one by one. The next morning, they left the city behind for a few days, heading north to a secluded lake cabin where the breeze smelled like pine and the world slowed down enough to breathe. Travis taught Dylan how to skip stones across the water. Elara read on the dock with her feet dangling over the edge. They made campfire dinners and fell asleep with the windows open, the sound of crickets replacing the hum of city traffic. On the last night, Elara sat beside Travis under a canopy of stars. Dylan had fallen asleep beside them, curled against his father's side. "You know," Travis murmured, "I think your mother was right. Life is movement. And light." Elara leaned her head on his shoulder. "And sometimes it gives you a second chance." He kissed her temple. "We made our own." They sat there until the fire burned low, the lake still and silver beneath the moon. And for the first time in either of their lives, there was nothing left to chase. Only the life they built. Together.